Right, good afternoon, members, officers, and members of the public who may be watching this on the authorities YouTube channel. And welcome to the Planning Committee meeting of the 1st of July. As usual, I will run through to see who is with us this afternoon, with members and officers. I am aware that there are some apologies, so I won't call those names out. So if you could answer yay or nay, please. Well, if I don't hear you, I know you're not there, obviously. Councillor Curry.
Here, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rozeski.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Bayford.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Hart. I know Councillor Hart's there somewhere. Have we lost him? We know he's here with us. Councillor Wright.
Here.
Councillor Garner.
I'm here, Chair.
Councillor Scott.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Keane.
Here, Chair.
And Councillor Patmore.
I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. I'm here, obviously. Our Chief Legal Officer, Estelle. Is Estelle with us?
Yeah, hello, Chairman. I'm here.
Thank you, Estelle. Emily Kennedy, our committee clerk. Ian Livingstone, planning applications manager. Emma, somewhere.
Yes, here, Chair.
Thank you. I believe it is only yourself, Emma, this afternoon. Correct me if I'm wrong. Speaking.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
And I'm back, I'm afraid.
Right, thank you. No, I just did call your name out, Councillor Hart, but I have ticked you obviously as here. So as usual, a few notes to read to you. If you have any technical difficulties during this meeting, please contact Democratic Services on call, who will attempt to assist you. Today's officer is Charlotte, and her number is 577193. Her number will be included at the top of the chat stream box for you to see and for your convenience. I would ask participants, when you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. This minimises background noise and will help everyone in listening to the proceedings. Microphones must only be on if the participant has been granted permission to speak. To gain permission, please very briefly indicate in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen, and I will make a note and come back to you when your turn has come. Would everybody present please make sure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls while this meeting is in progress. Please also refrain from checking emails or conducting other business, and ensure that you are in a quiet room, free from any disturbances, distractions, and that's throughout the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, and following the meeting, the recording will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. Members requesting to speak under Council Procedure 20.1, requests to speak have been received from Councillor Pugh on agenda items 3C and 3D. Is there any other member who is watching us or joined us who wishes to speak on any item? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair.
Public speaking.
Sorry, Chair. I don't think Reece Pugh can make the call. I think he's been tied up at work.
Sorry?
I don't think Reece Pugh can make his chat because he's been tied up he'll be tied up on a meeting, I believe.
Okay, well, when we come to that, we'll deal with that. Thank you, Councillor Hart. Public speaking, the following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Would members please note the following items on their agenda? Agenda item 3B, A02, agenda item 3C R03, and agenda item 3D D04. Moving on to agenda item 1, apologies from absence. I have apologies from councillors Orban, Duckworth and Taylor, to whom once again Councillor Rzeski is standing in for Councillor Dennis. I believe I'm correct. Is there any other apologies?
Sorry, Councillor Thompson. It's actually Councillor Rzeski is actually substituting for Councillor Taylor today. Councillor Dennis, I believe, is with us.
Is he? I beg your pardon.
He certainly was a second ago.
He was in. He's still trying to get back in, but I'm on call with him to try and make sure that he stays in. But he'll be back, I'm sure.
Okay, right. So, well, welcome to Councillor Dennis. I do beg your pardon on that one because I know Councillor Rzeski has sat in previous meetings. Agenda item 2, are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Agenda item 3, the schedule of planning applications and public speaking. Once again, if any site visits are required, this can only be done when it will be safe for all of us to attend a site. Agenda item 3B, planning application for approval, A02, 59 Norfolk Road, Margate. I would ask our Chief Legal Officer, Estelle, to read out a statement who's in favour of this application from Mr. Brown. Estelle.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal forms part of a comprehensive scheme for the mixed use of an existing large building in Norfolk Road in the heart of Cliftonville. Permission has already been granted for the community use of the ground floor. Before this use can be implemented, it is important to secure permission for the use of the upper floors that previously formed part of a residential training centre. The upper floors can easily be converted to large and spacious apartments that significantly exceed the national standards for residential accommodation and provide good quality living for couples and small families without compromising the amenities of adjacent residents. A previous permission for redevelopment of the site permitted 12 dwellings, including 5 apartments. The scheme is not that different in its residential composition. The residential conversion of the upper floors will make a useful addition to the present shortfall in housing provision in the district. The existing design of the building does not enable individual gardens to be provided. Instead, a communal garden area is provided to the rear of the building by demolishing an existing large single-storey extension. The conversion of the building to apartments is the most sensible way of reusing the existing structure and ensuring that the ground floor can be retained for community use. The retention of the building is a more sustainable option than its demolition, and the removal of the ground floor rear extension and external fire escape reduces the density of development on the site and improves its appearance in the conservation area. The external alterations required have been kept to a minimum following helpful discussion with the planning officer. The applicants are happy to work further with officers in terms of window designs to ensure the development comprises an improvement to the conservation area. The ground front extension has been retained through the previous grant of permission for the ground floor, as the conservation officer considered it an important element that showed the evolution of uses of the building. It is not part of this application. The officer report confirms the applicant's willingness to make contributions to local amenity requirements through a legal agreement. The development does not meet the present threshold requirement for affordable housing. The report also confirms that the development proposed will not create highway concerns because the site is in such a sustainable location, and the development proposed may well result in a reduction in traffic compared to its previous high-density uses. The scheme will bring back into use a large vacant building. It will provide additional large residential units that maximise the use of the building, reduce its bulk, and improve its appearance. The scheme is part of a proposal that will provide space for community facilities at ground floor. It is trusted that members will support the officer recommendation to approve this beneficial proposal.
Thank you, Estelle. On behalf of Mr. Brown, we'll now ask you, if you would, to read the report, the public speaking statement raising points of concern from a Mr. Ward. Estelle.
Thank you, Chairman. So, a statement from the residents of Norfolk Road. Heading, A Vision for Cliftonville. The following paragraph is the opening statement from Cliftonville Development Plan. Cliftonville will become a clean, safe, amiable place where families and individuals will want to live and take pride in. Existing buildings will be well maintained, enhancing the special architectural quality and historical value of the area. There will be a demand for properties within the area, and new development will be well designed with an attractive townscape, incorporating high quality hard and soft landscaping and encouraging biodiversity. There will be a strong community spirit, and residents will have pride in the area. The community will be a mixed and settled one, including families with children living in accommodation suited to their needs, a range of household sizes, including apartments and family-sized homes with gardens and high-quality public green spaces. Cliftonville will be home to a number of quality hotels, able to accommodate the tourism generated by the regeneration of Margate and changing holiday patterns. Next heading, 51 to 59 Norfolk Road. These properties were originally 6 high-quality Victorian terraced houses. During the tourist boom, this was then converted into a hotel, adding poor quality, ugly extensions, which are out of keeping with the area. More recently, and until 2017, the building was used as the Institute of St. Anselm's, a centre for training in spiritual leadership. Since 2017, the building has remained unoccupied, albeit some guardian accommodation has been made available. The area has increasingly attracted people loitering, drinking and dealing drugs. Next heading, flats. Cliftonville West has the highest percentage of flatted accommodation in the Thanet district. A large number of small flats means there is plentiful supply of cheap flatted accommodation. This then attracts transient people and adds to the deprivation cycle, which fuels the importation of socially and economically dependent people. As a community, we must re-establish a balance where we can. Given that the accommodation mix is currently heavily skewed towards flatted accommodation, it is important that developments contribute to changing this pattern. This proposed development is adding to the issues faced by Cliftonville West. Next heading, family housing. We believe the provision of high-quality family housing would help redress the balance of accommodation mix and reduce the current trend. In seeking to make Cliftonville a prosperous and attractive community again, it is important that attention is focused on how developments in the area can contribute to this. And then in quotation marks, in new development or redevelopment, flats of any size will not be permitted unless it can be clearly demonstrated that there are overriding design or townscape reasons for allowing such development, and that no acceptable design solution can be found to accommodate individual family dwellings, close quotation marks, brackets, from Cliftonville Development Plan document, close brackets. There is clearly an acceptable design solution to convert these houses back to individual family dwellings. So much so that a planning permission was granted in 2018 to a change of use to 5 number 4-bed houses, 1 number 3-bed house, and 5 number 2-bed flats, together with erection of 1 number 2-bed dwelling, 3 garages, and alterations to the fenestration. This planning permission was supported by the residents of Norfolk Road. Next heading, parking. Parking is an issue throughout Cliftonville West, and Norfolk Road is no different. It is unrealistic and disingenuous to say that the development was 60-bedroomed hotel and is being converted to 14 times 2-bedroom flats, and therefore the stress on parking is reduced. The building has not been a hotel for decades. This development will have a significant impact on the number of vehicles coming into the area. The proposed development has no provision or consideration for parking and the impact this will have on the roads. When the property was a 60-bedroom hotel, car usage was far less prominent than it is today. This must be taken into serious consideration. The Cliftonville Development Plan states with regards parking, quotation, criteria to be considered will include the length of time the building may have been unused as hotel accommodation, the level and availability of on-street parking within the immediate vicinity of the site, close quotation. Last heading, residents of Norfolk Road. As residents of the street, we are putting our valued time and money into our street to improve it. A number of properties have been converted back into housing. Last year, 2 properties just doors up from 51 have been family housing and high quality. Welcome this type of development. We have a strong neighbourhood community who take pride and care for the street. We get together and litter pick every month and wish to see the street improve further. If this planning is allowed to go ahead, the building will remain in its current state for decades to come, and the vision for Cliftonville will not be realised in the way we all know it can be. As residents of Norfolk Road, we do not support the proposed planning application and respectfully ask that this application is declined and it's signed by 15 residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Estelle. Speaking, on the points raised by Mr. Ward, members and officers, I know our rules are 3 minutes, but I think we've touched on this on these meetings before. It is quite difficult to really put that in place on these sort of meetings we're having. So it's interesting to listen to that. But obviously, when we get back to normal, the 3-minute rule will be there. But thank you, Estelle. I would ask the officer, please, to outline her report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so the application is for the change of use of the upper floors of numbers 51 to 59 Norfolk Road to 14 self-contained flats, with the erection of a first and second floor extension to the rear, alterations to the fenestration, as well as alterations to a dormer window on the front elevation fronting Norfolk Road, and also with the removal of a fire escape and a rear addition at the rear. So the main issues for members to consider for this application are the principle of development, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, and the impact on living conditions of both future residents, but also the existing residents surrounding the site, as well as considering the impact on highway safety and a few other material planning considerations. So the site is outlined in red on the plan there. So it's on the corner of where Cumberland Road meets Norfolk Road. I've got some aerial images now. So you can see the location of the site and the part of Cliftonville around it. Looking then in a bit more detail at this, you can see the extent of the site is a series of buildings, previously houses, that have been altered significantly over the years. And you can see that at the rear, there is a significant amount of built form development that's come over the years through the previous usage of the site. So then looking to show that on a 3D image. So the site is in the center of the image here, where the mouse pointer is. So you can see there are 3 rear elements that come out from the building there. And then this is a view from the rear of the building. So you can see those 4-story elements, those 2 4-story elements, and then the 3-story element that fronts Cumberland Road, as well as the large expanse of single-story structure that's present at the back of the property. And then looking at the other angle, you can see those rear elements there, and you can see there are a number of windows in those side elevations. Okay, so this is a view from the corner, so looking towards the building. So as mentioned in the speeches previously, the site is within the Cliftonville West renewal area, which is also part of the Cliftonville development plan document where those particular policies apply. It's also in the conservation area, which was designated a few years ago. This is an image just showing the main elevations of the property. So you can see from looking at this image, the number of you've got two different elements that have been added to the building. You've got a single-story flat roof extension fronting Norfolk Road, as well as then the 3-story rear element here, which is a much more modern addition to the original building. You can see from this image that a lot of the windows have been changed at points throughout the years, from timber windows to UPVC windows, before the conservation area was designated in 2017. So then, looking at the view from Norfolk Road, I've just got a few images of this, so you can see the flat roof extension at the front here. And then turning to the right, you can see up the top here, you've got the dormer window, which is the subject of this application, to change that from a flat roof to a pitched roof. And then a view back towards the building, just showing what it looks like at the moment. And then round on Cumberland Road, this is one of the other entrances to the building. And again, you can see in a bit more detail the 3-story more modern addition. Then moving down Cumberland Road and looking back towards the building, you can see those 4-story parts of the building at the back. And then there's the fire escape here. And then moving in a bit closer. So this fire escape is proposed to be removed as part of the proposal. And then moving to look at where that fire escape is, you've also got a single-story addition here that actually currently houses a swimming pool. That's to be removed and demolished as part of this proposal. So there is demolition at the back as well. So going through the plans of the proposal and the changes that are being made, on this front elevations, this is the Norfolk Road elevation. What members will see is this is the dormer window that we were talking about. So a pitched roof is proposed on that dormer. And then on this elevation, there is one small change to the window arrangement. So you can see there are lots of these sort of modern smaller windows that have been added in there at different times. It's proposed that some of these openings are replaced by windows to match the style and proportioning of the windows that are present in the building. So you can see now there's a pitched roof on top of this dormer, and it's been clad. And then there's a new window in the center of the image on the first floor. And then looking at the very rear elevation of the building with those 2 4-story elements. So the proposal here is to remove the fire escape and change the pattern of fenestration here. You can see at the ground floor here, there's a slight change because the ground floor covered swimming pool has been removed and that's been demolished. And then at the rear here, what you have is some additional windows that have been added in, which we'll look at on the floor plans. What you can't see from this elevation, but I will show you some sections in a second, members, is that there is a 1st and 2nd floor rear extension in this area here, which doesn't protrude past the rear extent of these 2 elements. So it's sort of within the gap there. And then this is the existing side elevation fronting Cumberland Road. Looking at this, you've got a new addition of windows along the ground floor, again to match some of the style and proportioning of the fenestration along the bottom, as well as windows that have just been added here to regularize the sort of appearance of the fenestration on that elevation. And then just going through the internal sections of the building. So this is one of the internal sections of the property. So it's looking actually sort of within where those windows were on the 3D image. And and just this is showing that there's a slight change internally. Obviously, the rear extension has gone down the bottom of the image here with some of the windows changing. Then looking at the sections, what we're going to do is just going to have a little look at this part of the building. So on the right of the image is Norfolk Road. At the bottom of the image is Cumberland Road. So we're sort of within the first of the three rear elements. So this is currently what it looks like from internally. You can see the fire escape on the right of the image there. And then you can see then the extent to which there is a proposed first and second floor extension. So it's coming out from the existing rear elevation, but not protruding past those rear elements that are present at the moment. And then showing the other side of that same element, you can see then the rear extension again. Some of the windows are changing because of the extension that's coming out, but it's not protruding past those rear elements at the moment. And then inside the other two rear elements, you have this window arrangement. This is being changed to include some oriel windows, which will mean that windows serving the proposed flats will face down the garden rather than face into each other. And we'll look at the floor plans to see that. And then this is the other side of that rear element, where then you have a similar arrangement. So these built forms aren't increasing in size other than having these oriel windows added. So this is the existing ground floor layout. So there is the previous use of this property was as a hotel with 60 bedrooms up on the upper floors. In 2019, so last year, there was a change of use application which was approved by the council for a change of use of the ground floor from a C2 residential institution use to a D1, which is a non-residential institution use. So it was the property had been used for a number of years as a training and residential accommodation by the Institute of St Anselm's for various religious retreats and training sessions and so forth. And so that was a C2 use, and they used the building, including the upper floors. And so the change of use was granted to use the ground floor as a D1 use, which could include a number of uses such as training, a day centre, and those sorts of uses. And later on, I'll show you the approved floor plan showing those uses. But what you can see from this floor plan is that the site is almost entirely covered by built form at the moment. So what is being proposed is that the rear extension is being demolished, as mentioned. There's been a communal amenity space that's been created at the rear from that demolition, with bin storage and bike storage also proposed. There are 2 spaces for visitor parking proposed. There is 1 secured parking space that's actually to serve the uses on the ground floor, as previously approved. But the main thing to draw to members' attention on this layout are the entrance points for the flats. So you have 2 entrance points on the ground floor fronting Cumberland Road. One is a new entrance that's been created where the mouse cursor is here, and then another entrance which is reusing the existing entrance at the bottom of the image here. And then there's an additional entrance, which is again an existing entrance, which is through that single-storey addition that fronts Norfolk Road on the right-hand side of the image here. Those give you access to the upper floors. So this is the extent of the existing layout on the upper floors. You can see from this the significant number of bedrooms and ensuite toilets that are in this premises, a large amount of built form and accommodation. So this is now being changed on the first floor to have 6 2-bedroom units created. The rear extension is in this area here at first and second floor. So what's being proposed for access via the staircases is 1 flat to the rear in this area here, another flat here, then you have another unit there, another unit at the back here. So these are all accessed via this staircase here, these 2 units here. and then you have another flat that's at the front on the corner, and then the last flat is accessed here, which is in that corner. You will see from where the red arrows are that the fenestration arrangement has changed in these internal elevations to avoid flats windows looking into each other. So that's why they've been orientated in the way that they have, such as shown. And then on the second floor, so we've got pretty much an identical layout as the floor below at first floor, and the proposal is then to mimic the layout of the flats below. So again, 6 flats being proposed there. And then moving on to the existing third floor. So these are the 2 big rear elements that you could see from all of the images. What's being proposed is that they would house two units there. And then this is just a roof plan, which just again illustrates the extent of the rear changes. So just to show you the ground floor layout as approved last year before going through the issues. So you can see that this shows an indication of the particular uses that have been approved. So you have therapy areas within the site as a training session building. Then you've got lecture space and communal training. So it has got a number of D1 uses that have been approved within there. So in terms of the principal issues that have been raised in the report, mention has been given to the Cliftonville Development Plan document, and particularly with regards to CV3, which is the policy for the provision of a family house in new developments. So that policy is specifically looking to ensure that for redevelopments of sites and new development, so when building new buildings, it's to ensure that basically flats are not provided unless there are overriding design and townscape reasons for allowing such development, and there's no acceptable design solution can be found. Now, the preamble for that policy specifically states, and I will just read it out for members, it states that the provision of high quality family housing would help redress the balance of accommodation mix and reduce the current transient trend of residents that develops from a high number of flats. There will still be many properties brought forward for conversion rather than redevelopment. So the policy is not saying you can't convert buildings into flats. It's specifically looking primarily at built development. However, the council generally has looked at this policy to ensure where we can, buildings are converted into dwellings as much as we can get that to happen. In this instance, the site has a significant amount of built form on it, over 60 bedrooms upstairs. It's got a very significant depth of built form. So even with a large area being demolished, members could see from those rear elements that there is obviously 4 stories worth of accommodation, which doesn't make it possible to convert the building with the amount of development that's on there at the moment into dwellings very easily. And so it is considered that the development as put forward would be supportive of the principles of the aims of the Cliftonville DPD, and specifically when looking at policies H10 of the current local plan, which is looking at Cliftonville and supporting residential redevelopment, as well as the new draft policy, which is H8, which is talking about the quality of the residential accommodation created. In this instance, all of the flats that are proposed are above the nationally described space standards. So we haven't applied the conversion flat guidelines from the late 80s on these. We've applied the nationally described space standards, and these flats do exceed those limits. In terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the area, previously the scheme, when it was submitted, included Juliet balconies, it included another rear extension. Those have all been removed, and now, as you've seen, the changes are mainly to regularise the fenestration arrangements with minor window changes and a pitch roof dormer. The rear extensions aren't visible because of the way that they are not protruding past the existing rear elements, and the removal of the fire escape and the removal of the single-storey rear extension is supported and is beneficial to the conservation area. So overall, we don't consider that there is a negative impact on the conservation area from the proposed. As mentioned, in terms of living conditions of future occupants, all of the flats are significant in size and would create quality accommodation. Obviously, they've provided outdoor amenity space, which has been accommodated by demolishing the structures that are there. And also, we have looked at whether or not the development is actually compatible with what's been approved on the ground floor. And that approval on the ground floor included a number of conditions to do with opening hours and also to do with sound installation. So we do consider that future residents won't be affected by the operations at ground floor. In terms of impact on neighbours, all third floor windows that serve bathrooms that are sort of side facing will be obscure glazed, and all of the other windows are not going to significantly increase the amount of overlooking that currently exists. The other big issue to touch on is impact on highway safety. So a number of concerns have been raised about the highway impacts of this. As has been outlined in the officer report, the previous use of the building as a hotel obviously created a certain amount of vehicular movements, but primarily the most recent use and the lawful use of the building is as a residential institute, a C2 use, and that does create a significant number of movements that come with that use, and therefore significant weight is put on that when considering what the impacts of this proposal would be. And KCC Highways have raised no objection on the basis of the 14 units that are being proposed in comparison to the residential institution operating on this site, with the number of bedrooms and facilities and type of parking that would be created from a training centre would actually provide. It's also a very, very sustainable site by virtue of its close proximity to amenities on Cliftonville High Street, as well as close proximity to the bus routes. So it's not considered by officers that there would be a ground for refusal that would stand up and appeal on the basis of that comparison between the extant lawful use of the premises. Contributions are being provided towards the special protection area because it's new residential accommodation, as well as towards education facilities in the area, and that's all outlined in the officer report. A unilateral undertaking has been submitted, which has been checked by officers, and so therefore this application is put forward for approval, as it's considered that it accords with both the new draft local plan, the previous local plan, as well as the Cliftonville DPD. And therefore the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you wish to debate this application?
Can I just make a quick comment on this? When you look at the front of that building, it has that absolutely awful sort of 1970s, 80s red brick frontage, doesn't it? That goes onto the road and it absolutely ruins the rest of the street. Is that going to remain, or can that be taken away?
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. It's proposed to be retained as part of this. Part of that has come from, so the ground floor isn't actually sort of part of the proposals for this application, but the previous application from 2019 is looking to reuse the spaces that have been created to use it for the day centre that they're proposing to use. So no, it's not proposed to remove those elements.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a number of concerns about this, in particular that Cliftonville West is a really high density area, and we've worked really hard to try and address some of the problems that causes, and that's why I think it's so important that the principles within the Cliftondale development plan of creating family homes and limiting the number of flats should stand fast in this instance. I think that although it's been said that the apartments are spacious, I don't think 14 flats within that is actually spacious accommodation. And there seems very limited communal space for 14 flats worth of people by the looks of the diagrams we've seen. I'd also like to comment on the parking, and it is already a very problematic area for parking around there, and to build 14 flats with only 2 visitor parking spaces is going to create more traffic. I appreciate what's been said about its use as a hotel and a training centre, but actually it hasn't been used as anything for a few years, and in that time more flats have already been built in the area, increasing the number of cars that are parking around there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do have some concerns about this application. I do recall an application was passed to change from the hotel to 5 4-bed houses, 1 3-bed, a couple of flats a while ago. Don't know what happened to that application. Now we have this one that's come in. I do worry, if this application was passed, how this development would evolve over time. No private gardens, fairly compacted apartments, and sort of a vague plan for the ground floor. I do have real concerns how this type of development would evolve, who would want to live there and how they would live there. So, yeah, I do have some issues there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question about the comment from TDC Housing in the report that asked for affordable housing to be here on this site, and I don't think there is any. Can you just explain what the reasons are for that, please?
Ian, can you?
Yes, Chair. So the application is for 14 residential units. The current threshold in the current local plan is that on development sites where 15 or more units is proposed, then we would look to seek 30% on-site affordable housing. So the report talks about this briefly, that obviously this is the current threshold for affordable housing. It is worth taking the opportunity to note that for any application that comes in, how can I put this? If next week the local plan is adopted, then for any application that's received by the department after that date for 10 or more units, then we would be able to seek affordable housing at a rate of sort of 30% on site. So there is a change in the threshold that's going to occur. But for this application, which has actually been in for quite a while as we've tried to resolve it, there's no requirement for affordable housing on this site under policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My concern's the opposite, really, that there was permission for 4 houses, not viable financially, especially at the moment. Financially, that's not viable. So what worries me is that if this application is not approved, then the people of Norfolk Road are going to get a crumbling wreck, slowly getting worse in their neighbourhood, because nobody is going to take this on board. Each one of those houses would have to cost about £1 million to make it viable. So that's what worries me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I cannot see anybody else wishing to speak here. So I'm going to put this to yourselves. And again, I will call out your name. And if you could answer for the motion for, against, or abstain, I would be grateful. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
For.
Councillor Jill Bayford.
For.
Councillor Alan Curry.
Against.
Councillor John Dennis. Is he with us? No. Okay, all right, don't worry. Councillor Mike Garner.
Against.
Councillor David Hart.
Against.
Councillor Heather Keane.
Against.
Councillor Pat Moore.
Against.
Councillor George Rosecki.
For.
Councillor Matthew Scott.
Against.
Councillor Linda Wright.
For.
Myself, I'm for it. I'm sure Emily from Democratic Services will tell me. I see Councillor Bayford's name come on here. I'm sorry, Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, it's okay. I voted for it anyway.
Right, thank you. The motion is lost. So, Mr. Livingston.
The issue with obviously the motion being lost is then to come up with an alternative motion. Given the fact that members have expressed concerns, those members that spoke in the debate have expressed concerns about the density of development in that area, and specifically the conversion to flats, with some worries about the impact on highways in the area. The issue that's created by this in officer view is that on the highway side of things, it is very clear that there is a lawful use of the premises which generates a certain level of movements, as well as the fact that the site is in a very sustainable location. And members have, not admittedly not this planning committee, but in the previous past, we have had an appeal in Wyndham Avenue, which is the other end of Cliftonville to an extent, which looked at this particular issue when an HMO was refused at appeal. And in that instance, the appeal was lost and costs awarded on the basis that members couldn't substantiate, or the council couldn't substantiate, a reason for refusal on the basis that it was in a sustainable location. In my view, I don't think that is a sustainable reason for refusal to put forward on our highways grounds. Given the fact of what's been outlined specifically about the Cliftonville DPD, and particularly with regards to the fact that this property is a large property that's being put forward for conversion, and a number of members have kind of mentioned that there is obviously the previous application that's been approved on the site. I think it would be prudent in this instance that officers take away members' concerns about this application rather than formulate a reason for refusal now. That the item is therefore deferred back to officers to provide potential reasons for refusal along the lines of being contrary to Stevie 3, and potentially providing additional information about why the application, in officers' view, couldn't necessarily be provided, with the item then being reported back to members at a following planning committee to allow for members then to make the final decision with that information provided to them, to decide whether or not to refuse it on the basis of that policy or not. That's my recommendation to members, and if members have an alternative motion, then that can be put forward either as that or something else.
Thank you, Ian. As chair, I think what Mr. Livingston said there is a fair comment to come back to us. I would like a proposer, if you feel that is agreed, and a seconder, please, and we'll go to vote on that.
Oppose that, chair, please.
Your proposed, Councillor Coleman Cook, and seconder, please.
I'm happy to second it. All right.
Thank you. Members, I won't go through all the names again. I think that is very fair that it does come back to committee with some answers which you've raised. Do you generally think that's okay? Can I have yay?
Yay.
Yes.
Yay. Agreed.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, in fairness, save going through all the names again. It sounds that's positive and that's carried. So thank you, Ian. Look forward to a report when it comes around. Thank you, members, for that. Moving on to agenda item 3C, the planning application for refusal at land northwest of Downbarton Road, Birchington. Back to Estelle now, who will read out a public statement in favour of the application from Mr. Brown. Estelle.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thanet has housing shortage. While the new local plan provides new sites, the planning inspectorate have made it clear that more sites are needed, hence the local plan must be reviewed straight away. COVID-19 has caused larger builders to stop building and will lead to delays in supply. Smaller sites that can come forward quickly will help combat the shortfall. This is one such site. St Nicholas Village has been identified as a village capable of accommodating additional housing. Prior to the new local plan, several sites have been granted permission. The principle of edge of village development has been accepted. The main consideration in determining these applications has been to avoid impact upon long views into and out of the village. Late last year, permission was granted for a bungalow at Huckleberry Farm in Downbarton Road. That site is next to this application site. In deciding to grant permission, councillors considered that the bungalow was in a sustainable location. Because the bungalow was single-storey and the site had trees around it, councillors felt it would not have an impact on the views from the village. This bungalow has a tree screen right behind it. The building will not go above the height of the tree screen and will not have an impact upon long-distant views. While the application is in that outline, an illustrative scheme has been submitted showing how a bungalow can be designed to look like a stable out of character in the area. The applicant is willing to accept a condition requiring him to build the bungalow to look like a stable. On the same agenda is a proposal for a stable conversion to a house next to this application site, which the planning officer supports. Considering the allowance of new houses on the edge of the village close to this site and the need for new housing, councillors are asked to support this scheme. If members approve the application, a draft legal agreement has been submitted to agree to pay the SAMS contribution for the dwelling. And that's the end. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Estelle. Once again, I'm going to ask you to read a statement raising points of concern from a Mr. Syme. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a form of an email. Dear Sir or Madam, I would like to take this opportunity to voice my opinion to the above planning application. As per the previous month, the same content and planning permission are in motion again. Again, this letter is essentially still raising all the same concerns as the previous 7 applications. In the past 12 months, there has been at least 7 planning permissions submitted for areas surrounding Downbarton community is that every available piece of land is looking to be filled with a property. Despite having no issues with the intentions of this planning permission, my concerns are with this planning permission are that it is merely a gateway for similar properties to be built on the adjoining piece of the land northwest of Downbarton Road. We can see from the previous planning permissions for the land northwest of Downbarton Road, brackets, such as 20/0451, 17/1412, 17/1412, 18/0567, 20/0062, 19/0818, close brackets, that this is potentially the end goal if the initial property is granted permission via this planning permission. It is evident from the case notes the previous planning permissions and intentions are well highlighted. The infrastructure shortcomings highlighted with the previous planning applications are still present in Downbarton Road. Despite living in Downbarton Road for a little over 12 months, these are still apparently obvious. Kind regards, Craig Syme and Cassie Smith. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Estelle. I think we lost a few. I don't know about other members and officers. Lost a few words there, but the content, I think, is clear and understandable if members agree. Thank you. I'm not sure whether Councillor Pugh has arrived at all for his comments. No, it doesn't look like it. So I will go over to the planning officer for her report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just sharing my screen. Okay, so the application site is outlined in red on the screen. Can you see the presentation? Just checking.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, great. So we've got Down Barton Road is the main road running through the centre of the screen. You can see the application site outlined in red. And to the left of this site is Huckleberry Farm, which was considered at committee a few months ago by members for the erection of a dwelling within that site. And just for context, just to the right-hand side of this, outlined in a darker grey line, is another application that's on the agenda today for consideration. So this is an aerial view showing the site. So you can see in the bottom left-hand screen where the red dot is, that's the application site. So in terms of the context of the village, it's quite far from the main centre of the village. So you can see the main centre running through the length and the high street through the middle of the site here. And then this is just an aerial view of the application site. So the application site is this piece of land here. So it's currently paddocks used for the grazing of horses. It's not the entire part of this site, but just the left-hand side of this site. And then this is just a view, again, showing it. So you can see in terms of the surrounding area, there's a large area of countryside, open fields opposite the site and behind the site. So the application site is again here. So this is now looking into the site. So this is towards the left-hand boundary of the site. So the left-hand boundary is following this tree screen on the left here. So you can see the current use of the site for paddocks use. And then again, looking into the site, so you can see that there are, whilst there's some hedge screening along the rear boundary, you can see beyond to the open countryside beyond. And then this is again standing down Barton Road with the application site on the right-hand side. So this area here is the left side boundary of the site, where you can see there's some existing tree screening, but otherwise the site is very open. And then this is further back along down Barton Road, looking towards the application site. So the application site is the far end of this. So there would be the boundary of it would run through the middle of this site. So in the distance, you can see this is Huckleberry Farm. So this was the site that was considered by members previously. Members considered the impact was acceptable because of this tree screen, and the dwelling that was approved was to be erected behind this tree screen, so it was quite well hidden from the road, whereas in comparison you can see this site is very open. And then again, just a further shot looking towards the application site, again showing how open it is. And then this is looking back the other direction with Down Barton Road on the right. Again, you can see in the far right-hand boundary is again a hedge screen, but the actual boundary of this application site runs through the centre of this area. And then this is just looking at the left side boundary. So again, looking now towards Huckleberry Farm, just so you can see the different sites. This was the access, and you can see the screening around Huckleberry Farm. And again, looking towards the front of Huckleberry Farm, again, you can see what screen existed around the site. And again, looking into it, you can see there was already some built form within the site, whereas this site is completely open. So the proposal was in outline form for the erection of a single dwelling. All matters are reserved, but this is an indicative plan suggesting how the layout of the site would work. It's showing a single unit towards the centre, which would appear to be with a dual pitch roof, quite a deep unit with a single access onto Down Barton Road. And it's also showing the potential for some tree screening, a hedge screening around the site. This is an indicative plan of how it could look. So it's suggested that it could be single story in scale and have some form of stable appearance. But again, as you saw previously, it would be quite a deep unit. And again, an indicative floor plan of how this unit would look. So the main issues is that the site is located outside of the village. It's within the countryside and it's within the landscape character area. An application for this identical proposal was previously been refused by the council in March of this year. This application has come in again, given the decision that was made at Huckleberry Farm, although the Huckleberry Farm decision was actually made prior to this previous refusal. In terms of considering the need, the draft local plan now has significant weight. We're very close to its adoption. So we don't consider that there's actually a need for this unit. It's only a single unit, so providing very minor economic and social benefits through its provision. In terms of this area, there's been significant applications that have come forward in previous years for conversions of buildings and erection of new buildings, and many of those have been to appeal. And in all cases, the inspector has considered that the impact on the landscape character area is very significant in this area. The landscape character area, the characteristics of it in this location is that it is open, undeveloped, which contributes to the rural character of the area, and also the long distance panoramic views that are provided by sites within the area. So in this particular site, given the fact it's surrounded by open countryside, the erection of a new dwelling in this area would result in significant harm to the landscape character area. While some screening is suggested with the indicative layout plan, suggesting that you could have some landscaping along the boundaries of the site in order to hide it, that in itself is not adequate, because it would actually, by erecting new landscaping, it would actually be contrary to the landscape character area, which is supposed to be an open site. So there would be concerns with that. So whilst the site, I mean, you can see from the road, there's no footpath links to the village, and this has previously been raised as concerns with previous applications, the fact that it's quite poor links to the village without that footpath connection. But again, with the approval that members gave to the dwelling at Huckleberry Farm, it's considered that it probably would be unreasonable to continue to object to a development because of the lack of footpath provision, given the fact that this is closer to the village than the Huckleberry Farm site. However, the site is considered to be unsustainable in the fact that it does result in significant harm to the environment, and this is not outweighed by the very minor benefits of just a single dwelling. So it's therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Two there. I'll let Emily recognise the voice. Pick who you want. Right, members. Sorry?
Was it Councillor Ruszewski at second? Yes.
I think so.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ruszewski. Members, do you wish to debate this? You've gone all very quiet on me. I can't see anything on my screen. Okay, I'll double check. Okay, there's no comment on my screen, so I'm going to put this straight to the vote. Once again, I think we all know how to do it now, but for, against, and abstain, and I will call your names out accordingly. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Against.
Councillor Jill Bayford.
Sorry, just to clarify, for the approval is to approve refusal.
Yes.
Yeah, for.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alan Curry.
Yeah, for refusal. Yeah, for.
Councillor John Dennis.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
The screen just went blank last time.
Don't worry about it. I've had the same problems. Okay. Councillor Garner.
Abstain.
Councillor David Hart.
For refusal.
Councillor Heather Keane, sorry.
For refusal.
Councillor Pat Moore.
Against.
Councillor George Roseski.
Yep. For.
Councillor Matthew Scott, if you're still with us.
For refusal.
Councillor Linda Wright.
For refusal.
Thank you. And I am for refusal as well. It looks so that is carried. An office recommendation. Just check with. That is carried. Thank you, members. Agenda item 3D is the planning application for deferral. Stables, land northwest of Downbarton Road in Birchton. Once again, I'm going to ask Estelle to read out a statement from, again, Mr. Syme. Estelle.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope you can all hear me a bit more clearly this time. So this again is an email. Dear Sir, Madam, I would like to take this opportunity to voice my opinion to the above planning application. As per the previous month, the same content and planning permission are in motion again. Again, this letter is essentially still raising all the same concerns as the previous 7 applications. Within the past 12 months, there has been at least 7 planning permissions submitted for areas surrounding Downbarton Road. As you are aware, there is currently 120 additional houses being built within St Nicholas, with the current trend identified by the village community is that every available piece of land is looking to be filled with a property. Despite having no issues with the planning permission, my concerns are with this planning permission is that it is merely a gateway for similar properties to be built on the adjoining piece of the land northwest of Downbarton Road. We can see from the previous planning permissions for the land northwest of Downbarton Road, brackets such as 20/0466, 17/1412, 18/0567, 20/0062, 19/0818, close brackets, that this is potentially the end goal if the initial property is granted permission via this planning permission. The infrastructure shortcomings highlighted with the previous planning applications are still present in Downbarton Road. Despite living in Downbarton Road for a little over 12 months, these are still apparently obvious. Kind regards, Craig Syme and Cassie Smith. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Estelle. Once again, I don't believe Councillor Pugh is with us. Just checking. Okay, I'll go over to the planning officer to give the report, please. I believe that's Emma.
Yeah, sorry, just share.
Don't worry.
Okay, so the application site is now outlined in red to the centre of this area, fronting onto Downbarton Road. You can see the outline of the existing building within the site. And again, an aerial photo showing the location of the site. So it's to the far left of the screen here. And then again, an aerial photo again showing the site. So it's this area here. You can see the existing building. And then another zoomed in aerial view of it. Again, the building is here. And then again, just showing it off to the right-hand side here. So you can see that whilst the site we've just considered was further over to the left and surrounded by the open countryside, this is slightly closer to the village. You can see in slightly closer proximity to existing built development. So this is now a photo looking at the building itself. So it's a stable building that you can see, single story, timber clad, add with red tiles. And you can see this fencing that runs around the site. So this forms the boundary to the application site. So this area to the front here will remain open, and this fence line will form the boundary of the new dwelling. And then this again looking towards the site, so you can see the dwelling here and this fence line running around and here, and this would then be the access into the site on the left hand side of the screen. And then again you can see the dwelling on the building on the left hand side and down Barton Road, and again you can see the proximity to existing development. And then this is looking back across the paddocks area towards the stable building. And then this is taken from the west looking towards the site. So the stable building is this building here behind this hedge. And then a further view again showing the views from down Barton Road looking across the site we've just considered towards the application site in the distance. So this application is a full application for the conversion of the stable building into a dwelling. So again, you can see the access running through the side of the site here, and then this area here would, to the right and left of it, would form the amenity space serving the dwelling. You can see the existing hedge running along the left side boundary and again to the rear, and then it's proposed that there would be hedge planting by that fencing that I showed you in the photo. So to the right hand side and to the front of the building where the fencing is would be hedge planting. This is just showing the existing north elevation and the proposed. So it involves the insertion of one Velux window within the roof space and the insertion of two windows. You can see that was the previous one, and there's the insertion of two windows within that elevation. So that's the main alterations that are taking place. So this is the front elevation, and that's now the proposal. So it's just using the doors. Windows are being inserted within the existing door spaces. Again, the side elevation, which remains the same, and then the other side elevation, which also remains the same. So the main alterations were in the north elevation. And then these are the two wings. These are the internal elevations of those wings projecting towards the front of the building. So there's currently a double door and a single door within those two projections, and they would again be changed so that windows were positioned within those openings. So there's very minor alterations taking place to the building. So this again shows the existing layout of the building, and this is the proposed layout. So again, there's no extensions or any additions to the building, just some changes to the fenestration. And then that's the existing roof level, and that's the proposed roof level. So the change here is just the addition of this one Velux window, and then the sections of the site. So this application, this site has been considered previously, and it has been previously refused and supported an appeal for refusal by the inspector. What has changed is that the draft local plan now contains a policy that supports development in the countryside where it's previously developed land. So this site is considered to be previously developed land, and therefore the principle of the development in accordance with the countryside policy of the draft local plan is accepted. So whilst the site still is located outside of the confines, it would be supported by that countryside policy. So whilst we still would have, we still consider we have a 5-year housing supply now, and therefore the overriding need for an additional single dwelling is very minor. So there's very minor social and economic benefits from achieving that. That has to be considered against the environmental impact. In this case, the building is simply remaining as it is, with very, very minor alterations, being the addition of just a single Velux window and some of the doors turning into windows. So in terms of the impact on the landscape character area, the impact is very minor. The only additional impact would be through the use of residential paraphernalia around the building. But again, the proposal to plant hedging along the boundary line where the fencing exists would help to screen that low-level paraphernalia that would be provided, and therefore would again reduce any visual impact. again, previously the impact in terms of the lack of footpath links to the village was considered by the inspector, and this was considered to be unacceptable. But again, given the recent decision members have made for the erection of a dwelling further out from the village further to the west, again, it would seem unreasonable to continue to refuse the application on the lack of footpath provision, given the fact that a dwelling further out has been approved without it. So on this basis, it is considered that this scheme now is acceptable, subject to the provision of a legal agreement securing the SPA contribution, and therefore it's recommended to be deferred and delegated for approval, subject to that legal agreement being submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted, that is to defer and delegate. Could I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
2 in a row. Councillor Rosecki, Councillor, I think.
Yeah, Councillor Rosecki.
Thank you, Councillor Rosecki. Okay, Councillor Hart, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I have slight reservations about this. The reason being is obviously you're then going to take away the menage away from the main field, because obviously they are almost linked per se. Also, where are the horses going to be stabled that are actually in that field, if you get rid of their little stables and make it into a house? Secondly, if that is where they actually currently reside, does that mean that if the owner of that land then puts up stabling block for the horses as they've been made homeless, that can then be converted at a later stage into more housing, and so therefore he's got his planning through the back door? If you could just answer those questions for me, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thinking of the horses, Emma.
I don't know if I actually have any information on where it's intended the horses would go. I mean, yes, it's clear from the photos that there are horses there at the moment. I would be assuming that this space is no longer required, which is why the application has been submitted to convert it. In terms of if they were to build something else, then there are some buildings you can build under PD within the agricultural use, but otherwise, again, they may well consider planning to require planning permission, in which case we would consider again the impact of why a new stables would be required when one previously has been lost in that location. So yes, I mean, I don't, unfortunately, just don't have the information on what would happen at this stage, I'm afraid, to the horses.
That's a fair comment. Councillor Rosecki.
Hi, yes. Looking at your pictures there, it seems that it's going to be quite well screened, and it doesn't seem to be like there's going to be too much adjustment to the building, just the odd bit of a window here and there and a door. It seems to me, but it seems quite a sensible renovation. I feel that I shall be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I must admit I won't be supporting this application. I have come across this one before 4 years ago, and I feel that this is a way of a housing development coming by stealth, because there will be a stable block comes along that will be turned into a house, and it will totally spoil the beauty of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can only consider the application we have before us, and as far as I can see, there is very little change. It is unattractive. I'm not sure about the change of residence, but I feel I have to support this application as it stands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else at this stage wishes to speak. Therefore, I'm going to put this to the vote, and that is the officer's recommendation is to defer and delegate. Again, members, if you go through this for us, for the motion, against, or abstention. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
I'll try and get it right this time, Chair.
Thank you. We do understand, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Okay. Councillor Bayford.
4.
Councillor Curry.
4.
Councillor Garner.
4.
Councillor Hart.
Against.
Councillor Keane.
4.
Councillor Patmore.
4.
Councillor Roseski.
4.
Councillor Scott.
Against.
Councillor Linda Wright.
Against.
And myself, I'm for it. I think that is carried. I will always rely on Emily.
Councillor Dennis, I think you just
So, Councillor Dennis, I forgot you.
4. Don't worry.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that. Sorry about that. Looking at my list here. Thank you. That is carried, I believe. Okay, confirmation, I'm sure it is. Thank you, Emily. That concludes public speaking for this meeting. I will call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning application. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as she reads? Emily.
3A, 14 Suffolk Avenue, Westgate-on-Sea.
Does any member wish to speak? Okay, so can I have a proposer that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendations? Could I have a proposer, please?
Yeah,
Propose.
Chairman, Councillor Matthew Scott says that he wants to speak.
Beg your pardon, I didn't see that come up. Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, hello there. I mean, yeah, just to sort of get a bit of an understand. So, I mean, I trust. Are we having the sort of the presentation on this, or is this basically just going straight to vote? I know we're sort of on quite held for time, really. So, I mean, that's my first question to ask for that.
No, I mean, apologise to you. I didn't see your name come up on the screen, Councillor Scott. But I don't think we've gone far enough. This can be debated. I'm sure Emily will correct me if you wish it to be. It can be.
Yes.
If Councillor Scott's asking for the presentation, that's fine.
Yes, that is fine. Yes, I thought so. Okay, so could I ask, is it Ian or Emma to give us the presentation, please, of Suffolk Avenue? Suffolk.
Yes, that's.
Is that you, Emma?
Yes, it is. Just sharing now.
Yeah.
Right, so the application site is this area here. So you can see the existing buildings on the site. So you can see the shaded red area, yellow area and blue area. And these are the existing buildings within the application site, with Suffolk Avenue being on the right-hand side. This is an aerial view of the site. So you can see the application site is towards the centre here. So this is the roof of the larger manufacturing building. Then on the right-hand side here is the office and some more storage buildings. And then again, the building off to the right here is another part of the site, which is also used for storage. You can see an access running through the centre of the site, connecting Linksfield Road to the top of the screen, to Suffolk Avenue to the bottom of the screen. And you can see that these are link onto Limiton Road on the right here. So this is just another view showing it. So you can see the existing buildings to the front here and off to the right here. And then on the left, you can see this is all yard area associated with the site as well. Then this is now, so looking with Suffolk Avenue onto the right-hand side, looking with the buildings here and in the distance here. And then just another view. So this is now taken from Linksfield Road looking towards the site. So just generally looking at the character of the area around here, you can see within Suffolk Avenue are mainly semi-detached properties, and also there's a few terrace dwellings, and then in Linksfield Road to the rear is mainly terrace units. Now within Suffolk Avenue, looking towards the application site, so the two white buildings are the application site. The proposal is to demolish both of these buildings. This is the access running through the centre of the site. So this currently isn't within the ownership of the applicant, which is the reason why this application was removed from a previous agenda. It was so that this land could be advertised for any potential owner to come forward, but it is unregistered land. Within the proposal, it is intended that this would form the access running through the site to the units within the development. This again, you can see the existing building, and you can see there's a bungalow to the right-hand side of the site before it jumps up to mainly two-storey houses in the street. And you can see here the bungalow and then the two-storey houses. And then this is just showing the gap between that building and the bungalow. So you can see the gap that exists and the fact there are some existing windows within that rear elevation looking towards the neighbouring property. And again, you can also see the fence height that exists there. And then this is looking towards the larger manufacturing building, so from towards the left of the site. So this has been used previously for window manufacturers, but is now back in use by the applicant, which is to do with a furniture manufacturing unit. And again, you can see the yard area on the left here. And then this is looking towards number 24 Suffolk Avenue. Again, the boundary of the site then is where this wall is running along here. And then just showing you the neighbouring properties to the left of the site. So there's there's a row of terraced units, all two-storey in height. And then this is just showing the other side of the road, so opposite the development. This is the style of properties within the street. So quite a simple two-storey pitch roof units. Then this is within the site. So this is now looking back towards Suffolk Avenue with the manufacturing building on the right and the office unit on the left. And you can see a large open parking area that exists within the site. To the right-hand side here are two existing units which fall outside the application site, which we'll see in a moment. So this is just looking at the storage building, and then this is down the side of that storage building. So this is between the rear boundary of the properties in Linksfield Road, and then the existing side boundary of the existing building. You can see there are a few trees down this access point as well. This is quite overgrown here, but I have previously been to the site when this wasn't this overgrown, and this actually forms a pedestrian access route that connects on to Livington Road. And then just a view again of that same side access. And then this is now looking to the manufacturing buildings on the right-hand side here. This is now the access that links on to Linksfield Road. And on the left-hand side here are two existing units falling outside of the application site. This building here also falls outside of the application site. So these are existing two dwellings within the centre. There's an access to the side of them that runs to some garages to the rear. And again, that is also outside of the application site. So the proposal is to redevelop the site, to remove the existing manufacturing and industrial units, and to redevelop the site for residential use. So the proposal is for a block of two-storey terrace dwellings to the front here, fronted onto Suffolk Avenue. Then a row of terraced one-bed units in this location here, adjacent to number 12 Suffolk Avenue. The building to the rear, the manufacturing building, originally it was hoped that that building could actually be converted because of the interesting roof shape of the building, but it was found not to be viable. So the proposal was now to demolish that building, but to erect an identical building with the same interesting roof design and using the ssame footprint as the existing building. And this would then provide for 8 two-bed masonettes within that space. And then in addition, there's two two-bed semi-detached houses in this location here. So you can see they're utilising the existing access that runs through the site. There will be parking located to the rear of the terrace units, although each of those would also have a parking space at the front of the site. This row of 3 terraces here has a garden area next to it, plus smaller garden areas to the rear as well. And you can see parking to the front of these 8 units along with visitor parking spaces. and each of these will have their own private amenity space that you'll see in a moment with looking at the floor plans. So this is the unit. This is what was previously the manufacturing building that's been demolished and rebuilt identical to how it is now. So this is a front elevation looking into that open parking space, and then the rear elevation of it, and then this is a side, so you can see the interesting roof design that exists. This is quite useful in that it allows for windows to be inserted in the sides of the roof in order to avoid overlooking of the neighbours. So you can see that while some glazing is proposed within the elevations that face the neighbours, on here you can see the annotation showing that those would be obscure glazed and fixed up where the darker grey. And this is the ground floor plan. So the proposal would be that you would come in through a single access point, and then each of the units would be accessed off this single corridor that runs through the middle of the building. And then each unit would have its own courtyard area. And then this is first floor level of those units. And so again, you can see now that the internal terrace areas that will be relocated for each. So this is a void in between with the terrace area above. So it's quite an interesting design. And this is showing the sections of these units. So that was that block there. So we're now heading towards now heading towards these units. So numbers 9 to 11. So this is the side elevation, which is facing the internal access road. So again, you can see it's quite an interesting design with glazing. Whilst it suggests it might be 3-storey, it's actually only 2 stories. So it's just got a high ceiling level within the building. These are for one bed terrace houses. This is the rear elevation, which shows a very low eaves level. So again, it's similar to the existing building that's on the site. It's a bit further away from the boundary, so the impact on the neighbours should be reduced. And it just shows that there's no first floor windows within this roof space. And this is the front elevation. So this one on the right-hand side fronts Suffolk Avenue, and then the one on the left-hand side is the rear. And then this is just showing the internal arrangement of those units at first floor level. So now looking at the pair of three terrace units that are towards the centre of the site. So these ones are located in this area here. So you can see the front elevation. It's just quite a simple design. Gives the effect of a double bay window. And then that's the rear elevation. These are all solar panels within the roof space. And then the side elevations and the floor plans. And then looking at the front elevation of these terrace units onto Suffolk Avenue, this is the elevation of these. So it's considered to be in keeping with the character of the road, where there is evidence of terrace units. Many of the properties in the street have bay windows, so the double bay window effect of these units, whilst not a significant projection, they do have the effect of a bay design, and therefore are considered to be in keeping with the scale and design of properties in the street. Again, this is showing at roof level, just the solar panels to the units. And this is the rear elevation and the side views of those units. And then the ground floor plan and the first floor plan of the unit. So they're all 2-bed units as well. So the site is currently considered to be, it's currently an employment site through the adopted plan, but through the draft local plan, it's an allocated housing site for a notional 23 units, which is what the proposal was for 23 units. So it is in accordance with, the principle is in accordance with the draft local plan. In terms of the design, as previously mentioned, it's considered to be a well-designed scheme that fits in with the character of the area. You can see it follows the front and rear building lines of the properties. And it's an interesting design using sustainable materials. So this is one of the key benefits of the scheme, is that the intention is that it's a zero carbon scheme with very sustainable materials used within the development in order to make it zero carbon and very sustainable. So this is fully supported by the draft local plan and the NPPF, which is pushing towards new development that is zero carbon. So this is a very big benefit to the environment through this scheme. In terms of the impact on the neighbours, you can see there's only, in terms of the block to the front, there's only a small gap between the units, but there's no side windows within number 24. So the impact on that property is considered okay. In terms of looking at number 12, the proposed development is much further from the property than the existing building. And as you saw from the design, the eave level is still at single-storey level. So it's not considered there would be any additional impact on light or outlet from that property. And there's no first floor windows. So the impact on privacy is considered to be acceptable. Within this rear block, all first floor windows, as mentioned, are going to be obscure glaze and fixed shut below 1.7 metres. So the main issue that would have been overlooking from these side windows is addressed through that condition. And again, looking at this terrace block in the middle, there's a distance of the access road. So again, the impact on that property would be acceptable. Highways have raised no concerns. The parking is in the form of 1 space per unit plus an additional seven visitor parking spaces. And Highways are happy it's an existing access, so the access onto Suffolk Avenue is considered to be a safe access. The only issue was through the turning for refuge vehicles, because it's expected that you would have refuge vehicles turn into the site, and there is a little bit of concern that there wouldn't be space to do this without double yellow lines either side of this access. So the proposal is requiring the applicants to try and work with KCC in order to achieve double yellow lines either side of the access to achieve good turning for the refuge vehicle. And that would be secured within the legal agreement that they would use best endeavours in order to achieve those double yellow lines. In terms of the contributions offered, the scheme doesn't provide for any affordable housing or any contributions towards infrastructure. A viability assessment was submitted with the application, which has been independently reviewed. The increased build cost from the zero carbon scheme has had some impact on the viability, but at the same time, it was considered by our consultant that whilst build costs would increase through the provision of this zero carbon scheme, the sales prices would also increase. So if you were comparing this to a normal scheme that was built with standard materials, it would actually be very similar, because the sales prices would actually be lower with that scheme. So they actually, in either case, the viability is considered to be very marginal, and in which case it was agreed that given the benefits of the development to the environment, given the fact that it's very marginal, we can't see that likely that we would get any contributions from it, that we could consider the scheme without these contributions. Because the suggestion was that maybe we should have a review mechanism within the agreement, but it's considered that a scheme of this small scale is not considered of necessary to do. So the benefits are that we're achieving the development of the site for housing, for which we have a need because it's allocated for that within the draft local plan. So we would receive significant social and economic benefits through the development of the site for the housing. There's significant environmental benefits through the zero carbon scheme that's being proposed, and the impacts on both highways and the neighbouring properties is considered acceptable. So whilst there's some harm lost from the loss of the affordable housing and the financial contributions, it's considered on balance the benefits of the scheme outweigh the harm, and therefore it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Emma. I move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. I have 3 speakers at the moment. For Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a great pity about the lack of affordable housing. Apart from that, I can't see anything not to like. It's a very well-planned, sustainable development with good variation, different types of housing. I accept the reasons for the lack of affordable housing, which I say is a pity. But apart from that, I can't see any reason not to support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a few questions and comments, really. First of all, it's within my ward, so a disclosure on that. This application been going on since, I think, initially 2019, which is like the first sort of consultation about it. I know that one thing that was highlighted was the concerns from Southern Water about the drainage and sewage issues. If I'm right to speak on that, I mean, has that been addressed? Has that been confirmed that Westgate is often at risk by the sort of the field areas of potential flooding, and I think that was one of the concerns with additional development being in place from Southern Water, saying mixed messages about potential drainage issues. So if you're able to just direct that one first, please.
Emma, can you answer that?
Sorry, just referring to the report, the proposal in terms of surface water drainage, it's intended that permeable paving and soakaways within the site would be provided, and KCC have raised no concerns with this provision. In terms of the foul drainage, the intention is to connect to the existing public foul sewers in Suffolk Avenue. And Southern Water have raised no concerns with this. So I don't think I'm not aware of there have been any significant drainage issues that have been raised by the consultees. All of them are satisfied with the information that's been submitted. And whilst some of them have then recommended safeguarding conditions, which is pretty standard, the principle of the development in terms of the impact on drainage, they have no significant concerns with it, which is why we recommended approval. Otherwise, we would have sought to try and address those issues.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Scott?
Yeah, no, okay, that's fine. Apologies, do have a few on these. So, I mean, my next question was, based on the concerns, knowing the area quite well, Suffolk Avenue and the actual access into Linksfield. I mean, at the moment, with relation to our refuse collections and even our fire department, what is the current accessibility there? Have we had issues where we've had issues of gaining refuse collections there? I mean, it's to my understanding that the current residents use the on-street parking, whereas most don't have drives. And my concern following it is with the potential of 23 dwellings additional, which could bring in up to 40 plus cars, hypothetically. That is going to pose an additional issue, especially with visitors. So to go back to the question, have we at this current moment in time had issues with our refuse collection or any reports from fire department?
Can you, Emma?
Do you mind if I just share my screen again? Because there is a plan that I unfortunately failed to show you. So I haven't had any comments from the fire service in terms of this application, but I have spoken to a few concerned residents about the issues with refuge and the fact that there are already some problems within the road for refuge collection, and that if cars are parked on both sides and refuge vehicles trying to come out of the road opposite, it can be quite tight. So I'm aware that there are issues, and I think this is what was picked up by KCC Highways, which is why this issue with the double yellow lines has been suggested. So this plan is showing the turning into the site for a refuge vehicle. So it's been tracked on a 13-metre long vehicle, which is the standard length vehicle that we have within the district for refuge collection. And it did show that without the double yellow lines, it is going to be quite tight to access the site. So if cars were parked where the double yellow lines are proposed, it would be very difficult for the refuge vehicle to get by, and that's probably why there's current problems, because of the fact there aren't the double yellow lines there now. So the proposal is to, where you see these yellow lines on the plan, the proposal is through the legal agreement for the developer to work with KCC in order to try and have these double yellow lines put in place, which will help current residents as well as the proposal. So it will allow for the refuge vehicle to get into the road and turn from the road opposite, as well as being able to get into the actual application site itself for refuge collection. So hopefully that will address the current problem and any proposed future problem.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I mean, the only other thing, I mean, double yellow lines, we appreciate them, and those who abide by the actual law. See not to park on those, but we've had various instances where parking has been. I mean, I trust enforcement in that area will obviously continue to ensure that collections can be maintained with our waste, because I think that's the issue. We have the signage, we have the lines, but it's just the enforcement. And if people feel that they're not getting any enforcement on it, they start to continue to think, well, it hasn't happened this week, it won't happen next week, and so forth. So I mean, just maybe something to put the attention to. I mean, overall, the actual application itself is certainly an interesting one. I mean, again, I'll just to reiterate what Councillor Bayford said, which was it is a shame that where we do actually have a need for affordable housing, that ironically the offset of a carbon neutral housing, which to my understanding was the whole point of us to really approach carbon neutral, is to also help build affordable housing and not have these sort of high cost needs. So, I mean, if a cleaner environment means a more expensive environment, surely that's a backwards way of doing it, but that's just my own fault. I mean, really, just to highlight a few things, it's just the concerns that I've felt and understood and picked up, having looked at the presentation, and also the objections that have been, was just the concerns of loss of lighting, which has been addressed to some of the residents there with the lower levels on the right side if you're facing Norfolk. But overall, it's still high density development, so potential of over development, loss of natural lighting, and the fire risk really with the access, especially with the actual entrance into the premises themselves, the far back properties. I mean, if we are able to get a fire department in there and out successfully, I mean, we can appreciate and we can all accept that we've missed a collection. It's frustrating, but to miss a life is, you know, it's not something you can complain to the council about and get it collected the next day. I mean, for me, it's a very contentious one. I mean, I would always support building on brownfield sites, especially when we are looking at the local plan, and that is one of the most contentious things. It is a very hard one. I would like, hopefully, other members to consider these when they do come up to them. But yeah, for myself, those were the questions, those are the points I make, and I'll certainly leave it up to the other members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Matthew quite a bit on this, and Jill, to be fair. I think it's a good thought out plan. I have great reservations with the fact that anybody is going to turn around and say, oh, look, there's a double yellow, I mustn't park there, and no enforcement officer's going to come around at 7 o'clock in the morning and give me a ticket just because a refuse lorry can't get in. I think it'd be better off not to build houses on that corner so that they've got a better turning area. I have used that little road that goes through, believe it or not, quite a few times delivering logs because I can't turn. And that's just with a small trailer on the back of a normal pickup. So I do have reservations about this immensely. I think people are just going to ignore those double yellows. The parking around there is absolutely hideous. And I don't think, although it's a carbon neutral and well thought out, I don't think they've thought about it enough. And to be honest with you, I don't think I can agree with it, just because I just don't think the access is good enough for the residents. And I don't think there's enough parking, to be fair.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Roseski.
Thank you, Chair. It is an interesting application. I was just a bit concerned the fact that we couldn't have any low cost housing with it. I'm intrigued by the point that it's going to cost more for these houses, yet they're not going to make a contribution. That upsets me. Does this mean that anyone who does a zero carbon development can expect to not pay any contributions in the future?
Emma, can you, or would you rather leave that?
Yeah, I can come back on that point. I mean, this was an issue that we were concerned about when assessing the application, because we we didn't want to be accepting a carbon zero scheme on the basis that we were then not getting affordable housing because of looking at that. So we did ask, when we've had the independent review carried out on the viability, we've asked them to look at two things. We've asked them to look at the viability based on this scheme. So with a zero carbon scheme, what is the viability? Is it achievable to achieve any affordable housing or contributions? And because the build costs were much higher per unit, whilst the values of the properties would be higher, it still showed that the scheme isn't viable. And I believe that's probably because it's a previous development site. You've got existing buildings on it. You're going to have the cost of demolition that's going to be a problem as well. So that's all added to it and resulted in it not being a viable scheme. But we also asked in terms of the independent review, for them to consider if there was a scheme built without the zero carbon features and was a standard build, would we then achieve contributions or affordable housing? And in that case, it was also found it was still unviable. So in either case, it's unviable. So the zero carbon is an added benefit to the environment. But in either case, we would just not be able to secure any affordable housing. There would have been maybe some scope through a standard build scheme to maybe have got a very, very small financial contribution potentially. But we felt that the benefits of the zero carbon probably outweighed the potential, pushing them to go for a standard scheme in order to achieve those small benefits. And for that reason, we've actually suggested a condition that says that they have to build it to this zero carbon standard. And it's only on that ground that we've accepted no contributions. But as I said, in either case, we would not be able to secure affordable housing on here because it's just not considered to be a sustainable site for that. So yes, it will be the loss of 7 affordable units on the site, and it is unfortunate, but it's just not viable in any case. So yeah, and in terms of the highway point, if I could just come back on that as well. So highways, KCC have not raised any objections to it. So whilst it's only 1 parking space per unit, they are only all 1 or 2 bed units. There's no large units on the site. In addition to that, they're proposing 7 visitor parking spaces, and highways are happy that this does meet our minimum standards for parking provision in the area, and therefore have raised no concerns. So I appreciate that there may be a lack of parking provision in the area, although saying that, there's quite a few semi-detached properties that do have off-street parking. And when I visited the site during the day, there does appear to be spare capacity in the area, although I appreciate in the evenings it might be worse than that. But on the basis of the fact that we can achieve one parking space per unit plus the 7 visitor parking spaces, there's no highway objection to the parking provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I'm going to bring in Mr. Livingston, just a comment, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to go over the ground that Emma's clearly explained with regards to the affordable housing and the viability of the site. But I think just to give members some comfort that, as you've heard, we did look at this in quite a lot of detail, and including modelling a lot of different scenarios about different prices that might be found for these type of products. And only one of those, I think 7 scenarios, did there come out as a short surplus, which obviously then led to the decision about the condition. Just to touch on the highways point as well, in terms of the enforcement issue about yellow lines, obviously this is something that members are familiar with other schemes where housing developments would have yellow lines linked either in the legal obligation through best endeavours to be sought from the applicants to go to KCC for a traffic regulation order. But I think I just want to make it clear to members that concerns about traffic enforcement not doing their job is not a valid issue to look at in terms of highway safety. If an applicant, if we get the yellow lines through this application, which is obviously what we're looking to secure, then people not adhering to traffic regulations is not something that we could take into account in a planning decision. And it's something that would certainly be, I'm sure, flagged up by residents and therefore flagged up by the other enforcement team in the council. So I just want to give members, one, the assurance that would be looked at, but also to make sure that isn't in any way affecting the decision that members are making. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Garner.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, firstly, it does sound like an excellent carbon neutral housing development that's going to be on the site. I do have serious reservations, though, about there not being any affordable housing out or any contribution. Though I listen to and accept the explanation you gave. I think my concern going forward would be that any new developments that are carbon neutral, as they should be, will use this or their carbon neutrality as an excuse to get out of providing affordable housing and to making their contributions, because obviously we really are short of affordable units. So if maybe Mr. Livingston could come back and give me some assurance that future developments on brownfield sites won't be coming back to us saying we can only do carbon neutral if we don't provide affordable housing. Thank you.
Ian.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an issue that was actually discussed at quite a bit of length at the local plan examination when considering whole plan viability, specifically when looking at previously developed land sites. And it is the case that with brownfield sites with buildings currently on it, that it simply costs more to redevelop those sites by virtue of, as Emma referred to earlier, demolition costs are quite significant and they are abnormal costs. And then all of the work that has to go into actually constructing around the rest of the built form in the area. So those sites are going to be potentially hit by viability concerns. That only does amount to a smaller proportion of the allocated sites in the local plan. As well as that, in this part of Westgate, we aren't looking at the significant or higher value areas of the district. So that again puts a bit of a burden in terms of the GDV that you'd be getting back in terms of this particular scheme. So it's a consideration that we have to look at on every single application for development on PDL, but every single site is different. And I think in this instance, this is a very unique scheme that they're proposing, not only because of the abnormal cost that they have to deal with because it's been an industrial site for a number of years, but there are other sites that are going to come forward where we're going to have to look at this. It's certainly not a precedent that's being set, though, because of every site in every part of the district that comes forward like this is going to have their own very specific costs that we will be analysing in every single instance. I think one point that I just want to raise as well is that when considering the, I suppose, lack of affordable housing, so it's not the loss of affordable housing, it's the lack of affordable housing of this scheme, that there are obviously other benefits from this coming forward, as Emma has already elaborated upon, the fact that it's an allocated site for housing development, but also the fact that you're removing a use which is incompatible with those residential uses around it at the moment, and that has led to environmental health complaints. So there are benefits that outweigh the fact that they aren't providing the affordable housing, which, as elaborated by Emma, could not be provided even if this wasn't a carbon neutral, zero carbon scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I note Councillor Scott has made a note here to come back, but I think possibly Councillor Scott, your questions may well have been answered.
It was just really on the carbon side. I mean, obviously, if the particular development for that area, they are looking to push the zero carbon. I mean, I trust that they put in provision for the parking spaces for that particular development at least. The charging points. I mean, if we're encouraging to have zero carbon housing, next, obviously, obvious method is to encourage carbon zero transport. So, I mean, is that something that could be considered in development or will be considered into the development for that area, charging points?
I think that has been done. Correct me if I'm wrong, Emma. I think that has been done, Emma.
It should have done. I'm just going to quickly through, but yes, we do. For any major development, we would always seek to achieve electric vehicle charging points. So usually that would be in the form of one space per allocated. Oh, sorry, I've just found the condition. Condition 22 So prior to the first occupation of the development, electric vehicle charging points are to be provided in the form of 1 active space per 10 unallocated spaces and 1 active space per allocated space. So where it's a property where the space within their curtilage, they have to always provide electric vehicle charging points. If it's a communal parking area, so where you've got the 7 visitor parking spaces, then where every 10 of those, 1 of those should be a charging point. And that is now becoming pretty standard for all major developments we're dealing with now, that we're requiring that provision.
Okay, apologies for missing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I thought I spotted it. I can't see any more speakers, so I'm going now to put this to you, and that is recommend, as I say, the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Again, I'm going to call your names out for 4, against, or to abstain. Councillor Colin Cook.
4.
Councillor Jill Bayford.
4.
Councillor Alan Curry.
4.
Councillor John Dennis.
4.
Thank you, John. Councillor Mike Garner.
4.
Councillor David Hart.
4.
Councillor Heather Keane.
4.
Councillor Pat Moore.
4.
Councillor George Roseski.
Abstain.
Councillor Matthew Scott.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Linda Wright.
4.
I'm for it as well. Sounds like that has been carried. I'll make sure it comes up on the... Thank you, Emily. As always, I believe that concludes the meeting this afternoon. Yes, I believe so. Thank you, members and officers. Our next meeting is 2 weeks' time, Wednesday, same time. I know, I fully appreciate that for come members it is difficult to get along, but you know, I appreciate your time. So I will call this meeting to an end. And so